Good afternoon. Welcome to today's CI Tools webinar. My name is Josh Osborne and I'm the Product Manager for the CI Tools here at Central Innovation, and welcome to today's CI Tools webinar. This is a weekly webinar that we run where we talk about stuff to do with CI Tools. It's either frequently asked questions, maybe things that you didn't know, updates, that sort of thing. Today we're going to be having a look at the CI Cabinets tool. So this will be sort of an introduction for anyone who hasn't used the Cabinets tool before. If you have used it before, you might learn some things you didn't already know, but we'll mostly be aiming for people who haven't used it. But if you have any questions either about the Cabinets tool as we go, or about any other CI tools for that matter, just enter those in the chat panel as we go, and I will check on that about halfway through and see if there's anything that I can answer while we're live. And if you think of anything after the fact, you can always email us on support, and I'll either show those in a future webinar or just answer you via the support ticket. Before we start, I also just wanted to mention that we just recently, yesterday, in fact, released the first beta release for the CI tools for ArchiCAD 28. So if you are in the ArchiCAD technical preview, sorry, the ArchiCAD 28 technical preview, you can grab the CI tools for that now, so that you can, I don't know, start getting your template ready or start testing projects in it or whatever you might be in the technical preview for. If you just email our support desk at nz.support@centralinnovation.com, just say, hey, I want to be included in the CI tools beta for ArchiCAD 28. That will make its way through to me, and I can send you the tools for that so that you can get up and running. We'll be releasing a couple of updates over the next few weeks as we go through getting things finalized, but at this stage the tools are up and running for all of the tools that you probably are already using, so you'll be able to open your existing projects and continue on with them in the tech preview if you like. With that out of the way, let's have a look at some cabinets. So with the Cabinets tool, I'm going to be using ArchiCAD 27 today. So long as you are using 27 or 26, everything that we're looking at today will look the same for you. So if you're on one of those more recent versions, that will show the same as what you see there. If you are on an older version, it will look a little bit different in some respects. I'll make a note of it when we get to those parts. But yes, it will. The fundamentals of how the tool works will be similar. If you're using a really old version, so as far back as 28 or so, you might have, as far back as 22 or so, it will probably look quite different. So yeah, that it may not make any sense with what you're using if you're using a very old version like that. But for most of you, hopefully we should be good. It looks like my audio is a little bit low. I've turned it all the way up on the recording thing, so hopefully you'll be able to hear it anyway. Apologies about that. But yeah, let's get into the Cabinets tool. So the Cabinets tool is aimed at a similar sort of focus area to the Doors and Windows tool, and so that is that it allows you to create essentially a single element that does all of the things that you might need to do. So rather than having to go through and place a bunch of different cabinet units for every part of your cabinetry, you can create sort of bigger chunks that contain all of the modules that you need, and then you can fairly heavily customize all of the sub-elements inside those cabinets. So I'll have a look at this one that I've got placed here first, and then we'll go ahead and place a brand new one as well, so you can see how that works. But if you're already familiar with the Doors and Windows tool, it'll probably look kind of similar to you. So we've got our configuration settings. So this is the high-level settings for how the cabinet works. So you've got the overall dimensions and how the faces works and the plinth and that sort of thing, and then we dive down into further settings for all of those. We'll look at those later on. Then we specify what modules are inside the cabinets. So this is where it will look a bit more like Doors and Windows. So you can see we see a sort of a preview of the setup of the cabinets here, and we can specify the sizing of each of these parts and what is in them what fronts they have, what handles, and that sort of thing. And then based on that separation here, you can set the following options for the shelves and dividers and for the space filling as well. So it will essentially allow us to build up to the set out of cabinet that we need as we go. So what I'll do is I'll just create a cabinet using the default settings and see where we go from there. So the first thing you'll need to do if you are using the cabinets tool is, if you don't have it already loaded, you will need to load the CI Tools work environment so that you can actually get the cabinet tool in your toolbar over here. So you can see it here. For me, it's below my lamp tool and above the corner window. You can add it manually if you like. So go to work environment toolbars and add it, toolbox, and add it manually there. I'm just going to do the easy way and go to work environment, apply profile, and choose CI Tools profile 27 or 26 if you're using that, and that will automatically load it into your toolbox here without modifying anything else in ArchiCAD. So that will add the tool in there, and we just access the tool via the cabinet tool there. So you'll see we have a couple of objects available. We're mostly going to be looking at CI cabinet today. The other ones are relatively self-explanatory as to what they do. We've got the cabinet corner, which would do a interior corner cabinet. This cabinet corner angled would do the same, but with an angled front instead of a right angled corner. And then the cabinet polygon is essentially the same as the CI cabinet, but it allows us to modify the exterior shape of the cabinet as well, which you can see in the preview there. This is useful for doing things like if you have it, you're wanting to meet the top of a sloped ceiling or something like that, you can use this to modify the exterior shape. But CI cabinet is what we're going to be using for most of today. So I'll just go with all of the default settings here, and I'll place a cabinet down. And what you will get by default is a left opening door and a single cabinet unit. And when I select it, you'll see that we have a bunch of hotspots available on the cabinet to do things with it. So we've got our normal black hotspots here, and then we've got the purple ones that will allow us to do sort of sub-element manipulation of the cabinet. So the first thing generally you'll want to do is create the cabinet to be the size that you want it to be. So what we'll do here is we'll just grab this node on the corner here and stretch it out just like you would normally do with any object that you want to resize. And once we do that, you'll see that it fills the space that we have given it with repeating units. 3 of them the same size, and then 1 smaller one fitting in at the end. This seems to be the way that most people would want it to work. However, if you don't want it to work that way, you can modify the way that it deals with the stretching by default. So if you want it to rather to make a single cabinet that's the full width of the size that you gave it, you can change that. So if you go into the cabinet settings and you just go to grids and editing here, you can see what we're doing here. So at the moment we have it set to measure from the left, and that when we resize the width, it will insert unit partitions, which is what we saw just then. It inserted a bunch of additional partitions, and they are all 600 by default, so it placed those 2 additional 600 wide units, and then it will also give a minimum of 150. So with that remaining size 1 left over, it will draw that one so long as it can fit it into the space that's available that we gave it. If you don't want it to work that way though, you can do different things. So if we say insert no partitions, it will just stretch out the single cabinet that you already have without adding any additional partitions at all. And if you do use module partitions rather than unit partitions, it will put in essentially sub-modules instead of entirely different partitions, which you'll see a bit more about what that might make sense to do once we get to that part in a little bit. But yeah, so that's the default setting, and if you want to change that, you can do. You'll see that now that I've stretched this out to more partitions, we still have more of these purple hotspots here, and that will allow us to modify the actual spacing of the partition. So I can grab hold of one of these and move that partition around, and it makes the relative widths to each other different. And then we can also grab these purple hotspots here and drag the offsets out so that you can actually put a big gap in between modules here. Obviously the fronts still act as if they were, because we're not resizing the actual size of this module here. We're just moving the partition inside of the module. So this can be useful for bridging across parts without having to create multiple different cabinet units here. Now that we've got our cabinet placed though, using the amount of cabinets that we want, so our 3 regular size ones and 1 smaller one, we can specify what we actually want the cabinets to do, and we call these individual parts of the cabinet modules. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look in the modules section here to define how we want our cabinet to be set out. So you can see the representation of the cabinetry here. We've got our 3 regular size ones and 1 small one here, and using these tabs over to the right here, we'll control how each of those parts work. So the first one here with the little dimensions on it will let us, as you can probably guess, adjust the dimensions of these. So you can see that we were dragging those around in the floor plan view. We can do that there. We can do that in 3D or section and elevation, or we can come in here and numerically set those out. So we can select one of the partitions, one of the modules here, and then we can specifically tell it what width it should be. This is 599, obviously, because we modified it slightly by dragging it in floor plan view. But you can make that whatever you need it to be. So we can come in here and override that to 500. And you can see below it's telling us that it's measuring from the left. So it's measuring from the end of the last cabinet from the left to the next one and across like that. You can measure from the other direction if you like, or just have it proportionally sort of equal it out amongst all of the cabinets there. And then we have the same setting here for the height as well. At the moment, the height is grayed out because we only have 1 horizontal unit. Essentially, we don't have anything above or below it, so we can't adjust the height because the height is dictated by the overall height of the cabinet. But we can split this module here, so you'll see the split option is the 3rd setting down here. What we can do is we choose how many pieces we want to split it into. So 2, we'll just split it in half, and then we can hit the vertical button to split it vertically, or the horizontal button to split it horizontally. So if I hit vertical here, we'll just get 2 units above and below each other now, and you can now see that my height setting here is available to change. So we can see 750 there, and it's measured from the top, so that will allow us to modify that. And then if I click on the one below, you will see that this one is grayed out because the height of this is essentially being defined as whatever's left after you set the height of the top one. So we can only set one of those. If we switch it the other way around and measure from the base, we'll be able to modify this one, but not the top one. So it goes both ways depending on which end you're measuring from. So we can go through and specify the sizing for our modules here, and then we tell the modules what we want each one of them to do. So if I select this one over here, we can go to the next setting here, which is the type, and this will allow us to tell it what we want it to do. So by default, they are all just a copy of the thing that we created copies of by stretching it out. So they're all door left at the moment, but we can come in here and we can set it to any of these other types that we have available. So we could go through, we can make this one an oven. It will place that in there. We can make it a set of slide out shelving. Any of these available modules, types here, we can insert those there. So we could say, let's go with a double door on this one. It will draw our double doors for us, and you can see the settings that match those so that we can open them up and that sort of thing if we like as well. So that sets the actual type of the module that is there. The front and the handle are distinct separate settings to that though. So we tell it the type that we want, which is doors double, but we don't tell it what kind of doors it has. That's where the fronts comes in. So at the moment it's set to be a flat panel, but we can change that as well to whatever we want. So we can put glass panels on these, and you'll see that the fronts are now glass. We can see through those, and we can go to handles and specify the handles as well. So we could say, actually these ones should be D-pulls, and we could have them be full height vertical pieces instead. So you can possibly see those on my screen share there. Those are being drawn in on 3D now. So that is assigned that handle type, and we can do that with all of these modules as well. So we can come back over to the one on the left here, which is a door left at the moment, and we can change that to something different as well. So they can all be different types of things if we need them to, and we can also make different variations as well. So for instance, if we wanted this door on the left to also have a glass panel, but for the glass panel to work differently to this one, we can just create an additional type for this. So we're using the type glass at the moment, but if we jump into the full settings for our fronts here, we can select glass, and we can see that at the moment it's set to draw a rectangular grid, that it's using these paint colors for the rails in the panel, and that the glass is set to this value here, and there's our dimensions. We can make a variation of that though, so we could say hit the plus button here, so we've got a new type called glass copy, and we can say that this one should actually have a diamond grid on it instead of a rectangular one. The glass should be blue, and that's probably fine for now. So we've set that differently there. So now we can go back up to our module view, and we can say that this one over here on the left is using glass copy. So even though they are both using the same, they're actually not using the same module type. Let's set them to both use the same module type, which is door double. Because they're using the same module type, they do the same thing, but the fronts of them look completely different because that is set by a different thing. So it allows you to go very granular in the amount of detail that you want in your modules here. And the same applies with the handles as well. You can create whatever variations you want to on those. So we could go into the depol settings, for instance, and see how we've got that set up, and we could create a different variation of the depol that just had a smaller radius on it or something like that, for use in different cases. So that applies to handles and fronts, but it also applies to the actual types themselves. So we can create multiples of them as well. So we were using the door double before, which is just specified as a door on the left and a door on the right, and has the label D2. But we can create multiple variations on that as well. So we could have it still set to be doors, but we could set it to have 2 on one side and 0 on the other, which gives us a kind of a similar thing, but we would name this as a different type because it's doing a different thing and allows us to do that. So you can go through and build up a set of modules if you don't have the types in here that you would want to, or you want to change the settings from what they are by default. You can just go through and make these match up whatever you need to, and then save it as a favorite or save it in your template or something like that. And then essentially any other time in future when you want to add one of these, you don't have to go through and mess around with the settings because you know it's set to what you already told it to way back in the beginning when you specified all of this. Okay, the next thing about the cabinets tool, which is probably quite important for a lot of you, is the way that it actually represents. So obviously we can create the structure of the cabinet that we want and make it look the way that we want in 3D and that sort of thing, but the way that you actually have it represented in your floor plan and section and elevation views is something that a lot of different companies have different ways that they want to do that, and so we allow you to control that to quite a high level of customization as well. So we'll just jump in and have a look at those. I'm just going to very quickly check and see if we've got any questions before we keep on. Just a moment. All right. Cool. Looks like we don't have any questions at the moment. So yeah, so we can control the way that this all looks using our model view options. So rather than going in and setting the way that these appear in our settings, so we could go down to here and have a look at the settings for the plan view symbol here. You'll see that it just says you need to go to the model view options for this. So they're all set in model view options. The reason that we do this is because essentially this will allow you to have the control that you would do if they were in the settings anyway, but it also means that you can have them different in different views, which when we get to things like doing cabinets in particular, it is very important that you can do that, because you won't want to see the full detail of all of the hidden line work and all of that sort of thing in every single view. And probably in most of them you won't want to see that, but when you do want to see them, you need to be able to have that available. And so setting it using a model view option just makes the most sense there, because it means that you don't have to modify your objects to get different results each time. So we come into our model view options and look under CI cabinets, and we can find the settings for that there. So starting from the top, we've got the model settings. This allows us to control the way that the model display of this works, so that is elevation and section views and 3D views. So we can specify that we want all of the drawers and doors to be shut. So this will override any setting that you have in the object. So if we had set the doors to be open to 45 degrees each, and we have this turned on, this will override that setting, because quite often you won't want them to be showing open. So you can have your model view option just get those all to be closed. And then we can also show the opening lines on them as well. So for drawers, we are defaulting to showing a diagonal dashed line on those, but we have the options to do a V or a cross. And for the doors, we allow you to specify which direction the opening line will work, whether it's pointing to the handle side or the hinge side. I think in New Zealand we do it one way, in Australia we do it another, and in other different countries it's either the handle or the hinge, so this will let you choose which way you need that to go, and then we can control the arrow length there as well. Space fillers, we can turn on or off whether we want to see those. I haven't shown you those yet, we'll get to those in a moment, but this will override the display of those. And then we can choose if we want the fronts to be shown, if we want those fronts to be transparent, or if we want to see through them. We've got the handles and the labels display, whether we want the internal components to be visible, and whether we want the shelves to be visible. The plan view settings works in a similar way, but it's for the plan view. So we can show the detail at the cutting plane. So if you want that to be shown when you're cutting through it, you can see that. And whether you want the unit partitions to be shown there. Similarly to the model view, do you want the doors and drawers to be open, or do you want them to be shut, or shut but still show their opening lines? And then you can specify how you'd like that to be overridden if you do want it to be. So if you've got it set to open, how open do you want them to be? That sort of thing. And then we've also got the reflected ceiling plan options over here, so we can specify if we want our, you can see here our drawers are being shown in the preview. Essentially we can say, do you want this to be shown in regular plan view, in which case the cut will happen at 800, or do you want it to be in reflected ceiling, in which case the cut will be at 800 but it will be looking upward instead of down. So we can specify that there. The attribute setting lets us control what the actual pen and line types are for all of those things. So at least in the international template for ArchiCAD, these will all be a sort of a light grey colour. So you're seeing a sort of a greyed out dashed line view, but you can override these to whatever makes sense for you, or whatever fits in with how your template is set up. You can go through and override any of these to what you need to. And then the graphic editing will allow us to control how the palette shows. So if you are doing editing in 3D, a little palette will appear in your 3D view, and this lets you control how those work. And the last one here is for legacy objects, which we're not going to be looking at today, but if you are using the cabinets tool up to ArchiCAD 23, when we changed over to the new version of the tool, if you are still using the older cabinets, this will control the model view options for those as well. They won't use the settings in the other model view options here. They have their own ones here. So if you're still using those, maybe you've got a migrated project or something, this is how you can control these. But yeah, so that will allow you to set essentially all of the different ways that your cabinet can display. So the last thing I wanted to look at before we finish up is the two remaining parts of the module setup, which is the shelves and the spaces. So the shelving works in a similar way to the how the dimensions did. So we can go through and we can see the structure of our cabinet, and then we can break that up into parts essentially. And what we're doing here is we're saying what kind of shelves do we want, what kind of dividers do we want, and then how many do we want to put in. So we've got these set up as something sensible already. So we can come through and say, I want to have 3 shelves in here. I want to have an offset of 15 mils. and I want to have one divider. So I set it up the way that I want it to essentially make the divisions, and then I press this button and it will just go through and do that. So you can see it adds in 3 shelves and 1 divider. We've got our offset from the top only by 15 mil, so it's a bit hard to see, but it's done that there. And then we can go through and do that with any other modules that we want to as well. So we can jump over to this module here and do something similar. So we could say actually this one's a 2 by 2 with no offset. Hit the button and it will do roughly the same thing. So you can see that added there. And we can also specify what the shelves and dividers are. So we could change the shelves to be glass shelves, and it will go through and draw glass shelves there as well. And these work in a similar way to how the fronts and the handles did. So we can go through and we can specify how the glass shelf, for instance, should work. So what the surface should be, what the thickness should be, and what the offset from the front should be. The spaces again work in kind of a similar way. We go through and we choose which module we want to work with, and then we can fill it with something. So essentially, you select which parts you want to do. Let's go with one of these over here. And we say that we want to fill this with something. So essentially, this is just adding some bits of 3D additional detail to our cabinets so that they look like they have something going on. So we can select a bowl stack here, and when we do that, it will draw in those into our cabinets. So if I show this in 3D, you'll be able to see that it's filled those spaces with those, and we have a bunch of options available for things that you might want to put in there, and you can customize the way that that works as well, so how it does the placement, whether you want any randomization or anything like that. And again, similarly to the fronts and the handles and the shelves and the dividers, we can specify the specific settings for each of these parts. So for the bowl stack, we can choose what size bowls we want. You can make multiple different sizings of these with different preset space for each of them, and just add a bunch of different ones, and whatever you want to do to sort of display the how they might be used, how the cabinet might be used in real life. So yeah, that is everything that we wanted to look at today for the cabinets tool. Thanks for your time, everyone. Apologies for the audio problems. I hope that mostly came through. If you have any suggestions for stuff that you would like to see during the next sessions, let me know either by emailing nz.support@centralinnovation.com, or just pop into a future webinar and let me know in a comment there, and I can fit those into a future session. Thanks for your time, everyone, and I will catch you at the next one.